G'day and welcome to Build Series Sydney. I'm your host, Hayden Quinn, and today we are turning the tables on our guest, Marc Fennell. We're putting him in the hot seat to talk all about his latest project, It Burns. Put your hands together, Marc Fennell, everyone.
Thank you. I like your set.
You like it?
I do.
I'm glad. It's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, this very, very real city behind me. I like it. I like your set.
I like your new podcast.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I listened to the whole thing, start to finish yesterday, and I was hooked. Like, straight away hooked.
Good. Well, I mean, that's sort of, that is what we were going for. Thank you. To be honest, like, that's sort of how it started for me. So, I live about 2 hours away from these two brothers that a couple of months ago I found out they had, once upon a time, the Guinness World Record for the world's hottest chili. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go talk to you guys. And halfway through this conversation, they mentioned that they thought the Guinness World Record had been stolen from them. And I suddenly had this bout of nationalism, which is not a normal thing for me to have. Where I was like, Australia had its Guinness World Record stolen from it. I am offended. And so I got sucked into this this world where it turns out Australia, the US, the UK have been at war for who could breed the world's hottest chili. And in that war, there has been death threats and accusations of cheating and dodgy laboratories. And that's when I was like, well, this is a podcast. So, yeah.
It's amazing that is an actual thing. Like, I love chili. Do you guys love chili? I think most people love chili. You see hot sauce bottles everywhere. They're in your regular supermarkets these days, all sorts of stuff. But that captivation to turn it into some crazy, incredibly over-the-top thing. How does that happen? Why?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like, I'm fascinated by the moment when food stops being food and it starts being an endurance sport, which is sort of what happened here. Like, you've got a group of people that let food start to tear friendships apart, and suddenly they're trolling each other online. And that was when I knew that it was about more than just the race to breed the world's hottest chili. It started to open up all of these big ideas about competition, about masculinity, because it's like overwhelmingly dudes as well. And you got to ask the question, why is that? And I guess above all, it was about pain, because these chilies they are literally thousands and thousands of times hotter than like the bird's eye chilies that normal people cook with. And you have to ask, like, why? Why would you do that? And there are people in here that, like, there was one guy that I met that used to be a professional chili eater. He was literally invited onto like Germany's Got Talent to throw up for them. And he used to have this YouTube channel where he would just like have ridiculously hot chilies and then put himself through pain for clicks and audience applause. And when you start watching somebody like that, you just go, what's going on underneath the surface there? Why would you put yourself through that pain? And of course, that just opened up all these doorways.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed listening was you go around and these different locations, these different crazy characters, but there's this sort of thread that runs through the whole thing. And it's a very personal journey for you, where you talk about your relationship with food and with chilies and your mum and family and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. That was the stuff I hadn't planned. So I had, when we set out to do it as a podcast, I had a vague sense of where I thought the arc of the story was going to be. But then at some point, somebody asked me, why do you care? Like, why do you care about this story? And I'd been raised with hot food. My mum's from Singapore. We used to have chili offs when I was a kid. And so I'd loved sort of spicy food. But at the same time, I've always had a really bad relationship with food. Like, I used to binge eat as a kid, and I had never really talked about that stuff. And as I'm having this conversation with the producers, they're like, well, is that why you're interested in this? And I had to think about it for a while, and it's like, well, I always had a combative relationship with food, where I felt like food was beating me. And here we have these people who are beating their bodies into submission with ridiculously hot chilies. And I found it, like, my initial reaction to it was like a little bit of disgust, but also a bit empowered by it. And so it's the whole narrative's kind of forced me to confront these aspects of myself and my relationship with food from when I was a kid that I'd never really dealt with. And I also never really spoken about publicly either, is the other thing. And so that's probably the scariest thing about putting a series like this out, because I've been in TV and radio since I was like a teenager, like 18 years old. Yeah. But I've never shared this aspect of myself before. And so that's been the scary thing of putting it out. And just in the last week or so, I started getting emails from people saying, I describe myself in the series as a fat kid. Yeah. even doesn't whether my body gets big or small, I will always think of myself when I look in the mirror. I will always see a fat kid, and I've been getting emails from people saying that's the thoughts on body image really speaks to them. And so, if nothing else, like whether people like the series or not, I know that for the people that had that experience growing up, it's meant something. And in that sense, I'm really glad that it's out there.
And that must seem quite empowering for you personally as well. Do you find, is that almost like a bit of a, I guess, a release in some way? Like a, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know what you're getting at.
You know, it's a type of counselling or...
Yeah, talking about something publicly, it's so funny because I'm so often on the other end of it where I'm sort of talking to people and I'm trying to get them, not trying to get them, but I'm trying to create an environment where they feel comfortable sharing an aspect of themselves that perhaps they haven't shared before. To be in a position where I'm sort of telling my own story and telling something that has always bubbled away in the back of my head and sort of putting it out there, it's scary, but it's also a bit of a relief. Not that anybody was like waiting to hear me talk about it, unless you were, in which case you know me too well. But there is something empowering about being able to share an aspect of yourself on your own terms, and so it's actually been nice. It's been really nice to have that opportunity to do that, couched in this really interesting, strange, wild story.
Very wild. And one of, like, in the story, guys, there's this one character that I forget his real name, but I know his YouTube name. It's the fire-breathing idiot.
This is Ted, yeah.
Ted, yeah. And he is insane. Are these guys... Like, I've watched a couple of his clips. Is he for real? Is he putting it on? Or is that, like, legitimately the reaction you have to those chilies?
I mean, that is the question with Ted. So Ted is the guy that used to eat, chilies on Guinness on a YouTube channel and put himself through an enormous amount of pain. He's done tremendous damage to his body. And as we sit and we talk, we work out that he had quite a traumatized childhood and he's always been this... Off the back of that, he's become like this class clown. He would do whatever it took to get a reaction, whatever it took to get approval, to get validation from outside. And, it's interesting when you work in front of a camera, there's a part of you that recognizes that, right? Like I will share X amount of myself because I know that it will get X amount of response. And so there's a part of me that looks at Ted and goes, I get you, I get what you've done, but there's another part of me that goes, you have chosen to do a thing that has caused yourself so much literal medical damage that it's deeply unhealthy, and he knows it. He knew it when we spoke, but it's he exists in this space that's halfway between something very real sits underneath that, and then there's like a performative quality to it as well.
Well, and a lot of the other characters, similar to what you were talking about earlier, use this pleasure-pain sort of scenario to beat back something from their past, whether it be drug addiction or, like you said, a terrible childhood, or turn it into a religious experience. That is mind-blowing. When you think about the day-to-day chili eater, throw a little extra chili pepper on the pizza or whatever it is.
You mean there's no divine quality to Tabasco? Who knew? No. I guess one of the things that it struck out of me as we were doing it is that we've always used pain as a culture to define ourselves. Like there's a reason why the term no pain, no gain exists. We use it as a marker of achievement, of success. People self-flagellating in various Catholic sects. Like there is this history of like using pain and a trauma to define yourself. What was interesting about this was like you had these array of characters that were literally using chilies in the same way that we would use that torture or abuse has been used in the past, and that was just a fascinating transaction to be party to. It was. I guess at a certain point I had to ask questions about why do we use pain? Like how can pain shape a person? How can pain drive a person? And then again, it always comes down to why? Like, why is this happening? So, yeah.
Why? Why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And when you think about a project like this, which is, I don't want to say so different, but very different to what you've done in the past in, the incredible interviews that we've seen, we've heard. You've had this career that spanned so many years in media in Australia, which, when you look at it, is quite rare. And you've done an amazing job. Those,
No, you're
Oh.
very nice. I'm blushing. You can't tell because I'm brown, but I'm blushing.
But those interviews, do you think they sort of shaped you up for this role, or your career to date has put you in a position to take on a project like this? Or is it completely different?
No. It's a good question. I think a lot of what I've done in the past has been sort of one-on-one interviews, and I love the purity of a one-on-one interview. Like, can you create an arc with someone's life in just a conversation? What I've been working on in the last couple of months is sort of bigger, more complicated stories that place conversation at the heart of them. Mm-hmm. It's another reason why podcasts sort of made sense, because it is a series built out of conversations with people, and I've done a few documentaries in the last year. I shot a film in Japan called Sex in Japan, Dying for Company, which was also along a similar theme of exploring a culture through people. And I think that's probably what I'm looking at over the next few years, is like, can I tell interesting stories about the world through people? Yeah. And I find that really fascinating, because ultimately what I'm most interested in is what makes people tick, and what goes on underneath the surface. And it's just scary to put something where you have to expose a bit of yourself to the world and just hope to God that it means something to the people that hear it. And so far, it's gone okay.
Well, I think if you are ever honest and open, there's thousands of other people out there that are like, that's me. Yeah. I'm the same person.
Yeah, have you ever seen the movie Almost Famous?
No.
Okay, so there's a scene in it where Kate Hudson...
I feel like every movie you say to me, have you ever seen, I'm going to be like, oh shit, that's Marc Fennell.
No, it's fine. There's just an amazing scene where the lead character is trying to lie about his age. And there's like, how old are you? Like, 18. How old are you? 17. How old are you? 15. And Kate Hudson looks back at him and goes, the truth just sounds different. And I do believe that to be true. That the truth just sounds different. You can tell when somebody's being really honest with you, and maybe more honest than they intended. You can feel it. And so in that sense, there is no point sugarcoating it, and there is no point lying, because it doesn't cut through.
Especially even though in an audio medium, you can hear the genuine nature of what you're saying. I can almost feel some of the pain and the reflection when you do think back to your childhood. You can feel this guy's actually ticking over in your head, which must be hard.
Especially when you consider how I recorded it, because a lot of that stuff, it was literally me in my car with a microphone recording some of those lines in my driveway, because I've got two small kids that wouldn't sleep. So I'm like, I'm going to go record my voiceover in the car. And so I guess it becomes even funny when you kind of visualize me just like spilling my guts about childhood and pain and all this stuff. Literally like this. Imagine it in the front seat of a car.
So yeah, and I think when you think about those characters in the show, well, I guess you call it a show.
Let's go with podcast. I think it's simpler. Yeah.
In the podcast, they all have these underlying issues. They're drug addicts. They're competitive. Some of them seem to be just liars. Others are religious in a weird way, and that links back to that psychology of I'm going to hurt myself, like you said. And instead of doing drugs, I'm going to eat hot chilies. Instead of God, I'm going to do this. How does that, like, they were weird for me. Yeah,
like as you say, you've got moments where one guy, he's almost treating it like a religious experience. Another guy, the professional cheerleader, he's basically punishing himself for the amusement of others because he's got quite a traumatized childhood, and that's the only way it seems to me, he can accept love, or at least the only way he could accept it when he was doing it. And that, I think, I found very hard to look away from. And I guess I wanted to understand it's a transaction. You put yourself through pain, but you have to want something back in return. And I think they were getting something back that wasn't helping them in the long run.
It must have been weird coming away from that and thinking, I'm so normal.
I have never once in my life thought I was normal. I do remember thinking like, could be worse, but I've never felt normal. And there's a line from another movie, and I can't remember which film it is. It's like, normal is what everyone else is, and you are not. Like, everyone thinks that they are not normal, and everyone else is normal, particularly in places like high school. So, yeah, I don't think I'm normal.
You don't think you're normal?
No.
I don't think anyone's really normal. You're right, but this is like on another level of not normal. When you did eat these chilies, I got to ask the obvious question: how was it? What was the feeling?
It's funny. I expected I expected more at the beginning. So one of the things that happened that isn't in the series is Ed Curry, who is the guy that has the current Guinness World Record. He just, midway through the interview, he just handed me this chili. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no. And I ate it. And there was a little bit of mouth burn at the beginning. And then it went away. And I was like, well, that's fine. Cool. And I went about my life. 20 minutes later, I'm driving on a South Carolina highway on the wrong side of the road, like desperately trying to not crash the car. And I start sweating and the colours get bright and it feels like the road that I'm driving on is melting. And have you seen Alien, the scene where the alien pops up? That's what it feels like. And I'm like, okay. I swerve into a strip mall and go into a juice bar, and I run into this juice bar, and there's this 18-year-old named Vera Lynn behind the counter who must have, and she's like, why is the sweaty brown man yelling at me? I'm like, I need juice. And I slumped back into the car, and you just have to let it pass because it's just that traumatizing. So I just sat there, sitting on a freeway on the state line between South Carolina and North Carolina, just thinking, what have I agreed to here? Like, what am I doing? Is this a good life choice? And the answer was no.
Well, even thinking about your career, which has spanned, like you said, since you were a teenager to what, you're 32? 33,
yeah. Similar
ages.
Yeah.
But is this one of the weirder things you've done? Because you've done some incredible things. You've spoken to amazing people. Where does this sit?
This is one of the few. This is one of the strangest things I've ever done, but it's also probably one of the things I'm most proud of because a lot of what I do is they're one-on-ones, and you've got limited time, and the goal is to try and find something interesting about a person that perhaps you didn't know or the audience don't know. This is one of the first times I got to tell a story, and I've made a few documentaries in the last couple of years for SBS, and I really love being able to craft a story that has themes and ideas and characters, and in that sense, it is both the strangest but also one of the most fun things I've ever got to work on.
Yeah, I guess instead of sitting like this one-on-one, it's like, okay, I get to share a little bit more about myself than I would normally when I'm sitting across from all these incredible people. But for me, I think back to listening to Triple J and that movie guy. Like, that is...
Still the thing that gets yelled at me on the street.
I could imagine, like, surely, every day.
It's funny that it's abated a little bit since I quit Triple J in 2017, and it was basically because I realised that it was a job for a 22-year-old, not a 32-year-old, and people should learn to leave Triple J is my rule. And I'd had 11 amazing years, and it is funny though because it still comes up, and what I realise now is I haven't seen nearly enough movies to satisfy people's curiosity about it. Oh. They're like, have you seen the new Avengers? I literally went to go pay to see the new Avengers at 8:30 in the morning on a Monday because I was like, everyone was asking me what I thought about it. I'm like, I haven't seen it yet because I'm not a film critic anymore. So I went to go see it. It was very good. 4.5 stars.
Even 4.5
Still got it. Still works.
Still ingrained. It still works.
Yeah.
But that piece, that little bit is so recognizable. The sound, the tone, the intro. People would tune in just to hear that, to hear your voice on a national broadcast because it was so engaging. You did tell a story in this tiny little bit of time about another story, which I loved. And I think so many, like everyone here would have heard and listened and been like, oh, I loved it.
It's, firstly, that's lovely. Thank you. It's a real honor. Like, I think with Triple J, like it was actually the only career goal I had in high school to be the film critic for Triple J. And I sort of, once I started it, I didn't actually have a plan afterwards. So I was like, I started doing it, I think, when I was like 20, 21, 22. And it was, I loved the challenge of can you fold a film into less than 2 minutes and also give a sense of, whether it's good or whether it's not. And I had all these like invisible rules about how to do it. So in my mind, I wrote it as though you were trying to talk to a slightly drunk friend at the pub. Why slightly drunk? Because you've got to you've got to get their attention, which means it's a bit up, and you're also fighting to compete for their attention from other things. Because you got to remember, like that review was spliced between two songs. Nobody was looking for it. You sort of had to command people's attention if you wanted them to care about it. And like a fun editing challenge because I also mixed and edited it all myself. So because I'm a bit control freaky that way, but no, it's a real honor, and I guess it's a privilege to have had that job on Triple J, and I'm glad for it to be a part of my story, as it were.
Your story, your journey.
Yes.
We can use the journey word. And continuing on that journey, you have sat down with some of the biggest names in politics, in music, in movies, from every, Jennifer Garner, Al Gore. There was one interview you did with an ex-Taliban turned British spy.
Oh yeah,
which
Dean.
That sucked me in. I was like, what? Like, how do you look back at all those interviews and think, how have I done that? Like,
I guess I've been very lucky in the sense that my first job out of like in TV was when I was quite young. It was the movie show, and when David and Margaret went from SBS to the ABC, they were like, let's recast this show, and they hired me. And one of the things I got to do very early on was they sent me off to do junket interviews, where you sit down and there's usually a poster over your shoulder, and you've got 5 minutes, and I hated it. I actually really, really hated it because everything about that environment is forcing you to not have an interesting conversation. And years later, I took a job at Channel 10 and they were like, can you do junket interviews? And I was like, yes. And I just made it my goal of like, you've got X amount of time with said movie star. What can you offer them that they are going to be surprised enough about that they will come back with something interesting? And so when the time came to have my own show on SBS, I sort of doubled down on that, and I said, look, if you treat it like filler is what it'll become. So let's sit down and let's see how much we can. And again, I think there's mistaken interviews to treat interviews as though you want to get something out of the other person. In order to do that, you've got to offer them something. And so it's about putting that time in to find that little nugget that they're like, oh, right, I didn't know people knew about that. And it's not about impressing them. It's just about shocking them into like giving you something that you didn't see coming. And I think, I've gotten it wrong plenty of times, like more times than I can count. But it's lovely to see that moment when somebody sort of sparks up and they're like, oh, cool. And sort of from there, out of movie stars, it's flowed into musicians and politicians as well. Because I think what interests me is what makes somebody tick. How can you find out what makes somebody tick in a certain amount of time?
I thought this was going to be a little learning exercise. See, I got to learn from the master here, which is...
I think Andrew Denton's in this building too, for what it's worth.
Where is he? Where are you hiding? But when you look at those things, you said there's little nuggets, and when they spark up, can you remember a particular moment with said celebrity or said personality where you're like, that was a real highlight, where you got something you thought, wow, where'd that come from?
It's always a bit risky, is the other thing. Like a couple of years ago, I interviewed Al Gore, and I did know that Al Gore nearly lost his son in a car accident many, many years ago. And you've got to be very careful with how you bring that stuff up, because if they're not primed for it, or if it comes out of the blue, they can react really badly. Yeah. And then you've sort of got to claw it back, and it's hard, and then you've got to edit around it. And we had been having this conversation about the world that we leave to our kids, and I think sometimes in those conversations you're looking for the doorway. You're looking for them to open up a doorway where you can sort of walk in without it feeling like you've done something, you've taken it in a weird direction. And there's been a few occasions like that. I mean, if I'm being honest, my absolute favourite is not somebody hugely famous, which is Paul Jennings, the kids author. We spent a day, he wrote Round the Twist and things like that, which is like a huge part of like my childhood.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but he casually had mentioned in another interview that his dad didn't love him. And then they just sort of let it hang, and then they didn't ask any more about it. And so we spent a day filming with him, and I asked, he mentioned he could always make his mum laugh. And I said, could you always make dad laugh? And he just gave me this incredibly cold no. And then it all sort of tumbled out that his dad was very unpleasant and borderline abusive, if you ask me. And it's an incredible privilege when somebody feels safe enough, trusts enough what you're doing, that they will feel like they can finally share that. Because there is a space somewhere between interview and therapy. Like interviews shouldn't be therapy, but they have that component to them. And I guess you have these like slight out-of-body experiences like, okay, we're going there. Okay, all right.
Here we go. What do I do next? What's next?
Often what I do is I just sit quietly and just let them keep talking. Because I think people nature abhors a vacuum, and so does talent. Like, if you give somebody silence, they will naturally want to fill it. And so, yeah, I just let him go and let him share what he wanted to share, and it was a strange and lovely and sad moment.
It's funny because that is sometimes the case when you are in a moment and you've got a microphone and there's cameras or whatever there may be. People do sometimes feel obliged or go, this is my chance, I'm going to do it. Like they've been waiting for that moment to let it out. And in a situation like that, I'm sure it was a bit of a relief for him as well.
I think so. I think there's always a space though between when they've said it and then before they've seen it, where they really just have to trust you, and you have to do right by them, because obviously when it comes to this kind of medium, you have to suck it together in an edit to make it flow often, and in that moment is a tremendous responsibility for you to make sure that they feel heard when they see the final piece. They've spoken to you in the interview, but they're not going to be heard until they see the final piece.
Yeah,
I think that moment is really important to sort of respect,
just to get right.
Yeah.
When you think about those beautiful moments like you just mentioned, there's obviously conversely moments where you're like, oh shit, what did I just do? What happened? Any of those that come straight to mind?
Well, the one that I will always regard as my biggest mistake was years ago, Triple J had a TV show called JTV, and they'd booked an interview with Brendan Fraser, and I was like, well, interviewing Brendan Fraser. All right, I'll go do it. And because I'm quite obsessive about research, I found that they took out kidnapping insurance on him when they made the first Mummy movie. And I was like, oh, this would be great. I'll ask him about, do you know how much you're worth as a kidnap victim? And he'll be like, no, I don't know. And I'll hand him today's newspaper, and he can hold it up under his chin and look at the camera and go, hi, my name's Brendan Fraser, and I've been kidnapped by JTV. And I'm like, it'll be a great promo. It'll look fantastic. I screwed the delivery, so I stumbled on delivery. He had just gotten off a ridiculously long flight and therefore was not in the mood. And he literally threw the magazine, the newspaper back at me, and I was like, okay, let's talk about adventure movies. But I learned a really important lesson from it, which is that people aren't puppets. Like, if you want to do a gag with somebody, they need a little bit of forewarning, or you need to know that they're in the moment with you. And I think when you sit in front of somebody, it's sharing and it's vulnerable, and they're considering how it's going to be seen back home and all that sort of stuff. You have to understand when somebody agrees to an interview with you, you have to think about what is it, why did they say yes? Like, what do they want out of it? Do they want to seem smart? Do they want to seem funny? Do they want to seem clever? Like, all of those things. Because if you understand that, you can lean into what it is that you don't have to give them exactly what they want. Yeah. In fact, sometimes you really shouldn't. But if you understand what they want out of it, you can kind of angle your way into it to sort of find something that satisfies them. They feel like they didn't have a bad time, but also gets what you find interesting about them at the same time. So it's a dance, and I stood on his foot, as it were.
Stood right on his toe and threw it straight back at you.
Yeah.
Well, I guess those things happen, you get out of it. But when you are interviewing some of these massive names, off the top of your head, there's a highlight reel of yours that just has name after name after name. Can you string some of your favourites when, I guess, celebrities and others?
So, Jennifer Lawrence, Will Smith, Matt Damon, Tom Cruise. God, they merge. There's others.
And out of those couple you just named, what would be the best moment? I personally love the Jennifer Lawrence chat. That was
she was great because she's been you can tell she's been asked a lot of dumb questions. I shot that in New York, and it was a ridiculous situation where I flew in at 3:00, shot the interview at 10:00 in the morning the next day, and was on a plane again by 1:00 in the afternoon. It was really fly in, fly out. But she's really smart, and she wants to talk about the issues that matter to her, which at the time was like how much women were paid versus men. And it's about, for me, I guess it's about finding ways to bring out the best in them. Also, she's funny. And, it's always great having somebody that has a bit of a repartee that you can bounce with. Yep. Tom Cruise was a little bit harder in the sense that he's not very self-reflexive, which means that if you're trying to talk to him about because what these interviews are essentially is I'm trying to get you to identify turning points in your life. So if I string together enough turning points in your life, we can tell a story about your life through a conversation. He says, hitting the mic like a pro. The problem with Tom Cruise is he doesn't see himself that way. And I remember getting like 15 minutes into this interview. He was charming, very friendly, lovely guy, but he couldn't talk about his life in terms of like, I was here and then this happened and this changed. In his mind, he's always been the same way. Nothing's ever changed ever. I was like, okay, well, that's how you see you. But what was interesting is like when I started talking to him about specific movies, like, I did that film and then I totally changed the script and I came out of it like this. So he could only see his life through the movies that he made. So if you ever watch that interview, I ended up like subtitling it, Tom Cruise, the movies that made me. Because I was like, I just want to set expectations about what you're going to get from this interview.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it worked okay. But he's like really charming, but it's so interesting talking to a person that can't sort of identify how they have changed. It's like, I've always been this way. I'm like, okay, cool.
This is me.
Yeah.
I feel like Tom would be a good character in It Burns if it was ever a film. He'd be one of those crazy chili growers from the US.
Somebody said to me, like, it really should be a movie or a TV series just because the characters in it are so good. And I'm starting to come around to them. I've been so deep in it for the last year that I can't see them anything other than people. But now listening back to them, like, yeah, they are good characters. Yeah. They would make a good thing.
Who would play Marc Fennell, though?
Ooh, well, I just saw the new Pikachu movie, and I quite like the lead star of that, Justice Smith.
There we go.
I've decided it's going to be him.
It's him? Okay.
There's actually just not that many people that my skin tone in Hollywood, apparently. So
that's true. Well, that's another thing. You know, you look at the media today, the landscape is changing, which is a great thing, sitting here as the whitest guy in Sydney right now.
Oh, yeah, you got a tan. Come on, buddy. Don't undersell it.
I'm working on the tan. But how do you feel about that whole side of media, particularly coming from, I guess, when you look at the SBS and ABC, who've always been quite good at providing that, I guess, diversity?
Yeah, I mean, Australia does need to do better because I think the reality is, like, if you go walking around the streets of any major city in Australia, you see this incredible diversity of faces, and then you turn on the TV and you don't. It is interesting to me that shows that have reality TV sort of leads the way. I mean, obviously, you're a graduate of the MasterChef school, and MasterChef produce the most incredible diversity of faces and that have gone on to have amazing media careers. So it's a really important show in that regard. What I'm slightly concerned about is if you look at journalism and drama, there's a lot less of that diversity on sort of commercial platforms in particular. You're right, like the ABC and SBS, I mean, certainly SBS. I think in some ways people in the rest of the media look at SBS and go, well, it's a diversity get out of jail free card. They're doing it, so we don't have to. And that's not okay. Because the reality is, the makeup of Australia is changing, and if you are a smart commercial media organisation, you should look at it and go, we should reflect Australia.
Yeah.
And so I think that does need to change. It is changing a little bit, but it could change faster.
Well, where do you think that breakdown is happening? Obviously, a journalism class or a media class at university is going to be extremely diverse.
Yeah.
Where does that flow through to the media we watch today?
That's an interesting and really good question. I think I'm the creative director of a not-for-profit group called Media Diversity Australia, and we've done lots of sort of workshops with people in the media, particularly younger people in the media, and we do find that there are a lot of diverse people that do journalism degrees, for example. They get into organisations and a lot of them don't last. So that to me suggests that there is a cultural problem, particularly so our focus is on journalism. So that suggests to me there is a sink or swim culture within newsrooms in Australia that probably isn't supportive enough of people that don't come from a certain background. It's complicated because I think the problems tend to be at a middle management level. Like if you talk to senior executives at any big organisation, they'll always say we want a more, because it makes sense. Like it makes sense from a commercial standpoint to have more diverse staff, but somehow somewhere along the line, particularly around middle management, they become a lot less amenable to making sure those people stay in those jobs, and that is a complicated problem.
I was going to say it's a complicated question, and what are the steps that we as people in the media, myself and yourself, who are, eventually going to be in an older, more managerial role like the one you're currently in, what are the steps we take to ensure that these people stay around?
I think we need to change our perception about what a person on Australian TV looks like a little bit. Like one of the things I've often reflected on is if you close your eyes and you listen to me talk or Waleed Ali talk or Tracy Vo talk or you talk, we don't sound that different because Australian TV tends not to have a problem so much with skin colour as it does with accent. I think we need to open our definition a little bit about what a person on TV should sound like. Like if you go to the UK, there are regional accents, there are ethnic accents all over both commercial and the BBC and Channel 4. So I think some of it is about perception, about what we think good sounds like, that, you know, it's okay to have a different sounding accent on TV. The world won't die. I also think it's about recognising that for people that come from diverse backgrounds, media isn't necessarily, like, to make it personal for a second, it took me years to convince my mum, that me having a job in TV was going to last and going to be good, because, you know, I come from a culture where your parents want you to be doctors and lawyers or teachers. In my case, I come from a family of teachers. So I think there's something on the other end of the spectrum as well, where there's a lot of people that don't, if you grow up as a brown person in Australia, you don't see yourself on TV. It's not seen as a career goal. So if you don't see it, you can't really be it.
Yeah.
And so it comes at it from both angles. I think we as an industry need to widen our perception about what a person in the media should be. But I also think I'm hoping more people that can't see themselves on TV don't take that as a no and keep pushing through. And in the meantime, you know, in the middle zone, we probably need to do some work about making sure that particularly people that don't come from particularly wealthy backgrounds, because a lot of the way you get into media jobs is you agree to work for free for a lot, and that is not something that everybody can afford to do. So like, you asked a complicated question, and unfortunately I've given you a 3-part answer, which is the worst thing anyone can do in this format. But I think it requires, I don't think it's going to be solved by a single thing. It's going to need a lot of little small changes throughout on all sides to fix in time.
Well, hopefully that time comes soon, like you said, very soon. And looking again to the future, you have 2 young children, and you're 32 years old. I'm the same age. Thinking about children blows my mind.
I'm thinking about a vasectomy right now. I've had enough children.
How is it, but, you know, being a family man and working your ass off all the time?
I think it's important to note that neither of those two things happen in a vacuum. So my wife also works in the media as well, and I can only do the things that I can do because she's extremely forgiving. No, I mean it's really complicated to make it all fit together. But by the same token, like, you know, I'm really lucky that I've been given the opportunities I've been given, and I can make it work. Like, I have no tertiary education. I came straight out of school, and I sort of accidentally ended up in a job, and with that imposter syndrome, you work your ass off to sort of justify whatever luck you were given. Yeah. And so in my mind, like, I had my first TV show, Axe, before I turned 21. So I've always been like,
well
okay,
done.
Yeah, it's a real achievement on my part. And then but I vividly remember thinking, like, I've got to have at least 2 jobs at all times in order to make this work. And I have, and I've sort of pushed it up to like 5 jobs in the last year, which I don't recommend. It's not healthy. But like, part of me, I need to be a workaholic. Like, if I don't keep working and doing stuff, I get quite antsy. But in the last couple of months, I've worked out that I really need to, you know, there are these 3 humans that I live with that also require as much time of me as my work does, and I need to get better at how I manage that. And I think I guess that's part of growing up. It's just realizing that you don't just belong to you belong to 3 other people as well, and you've got to make sure that they're not getting a raw deal as well.
When you are just switched off, you know, you're not doing everything in the whole media world you can do. What are you doing, like, on the weekend or on a Tuesday when you've got a day off with the kids?
I will invent a job for myself. Like, this was the product, no joke, this was the product of, like, it was summer holidays, I think the end of 2017, 2018, and, like, I randomly, a friend of mine passed me an article about super hot chilies, and I had not a lot of work on because it was summer, no ratings period, and I was like, I'm just going to start emailing people. And that's how this started. So what happens with me is, like, if you leave me too much time to myself, I will just invent a job. It's so like, and even now, like we're taking the kids on a holiday to London in the next couple of months, and Madeline's like, you best not come up with a TV show idea while we're over there because like you will. And I think I guess you just keep working until you. No, this is terrible. This is terrible life advice. Just keep working. It's amazing seeing actually now the world of content that's opened up to us on things on those big streaming platforms, and I just get sucked into vortexes because I'm a weird obsessive dude.
The vortex is good. We're going to get sucked into a few questions from our audience.
Hi, audience.
Say hello. Come on, guys.
Hi.
Yeah.
It's not rhetorical.
It's not a rhetorical question.
I don't know why
We're
I'm
right
doing
here.
a stupid voice. I'm so sorry. I'll stop.
Okay. All right. First up, we have a question from Bianca. What's your most embarrassing interview moment? The one that you look back on and cringe, but also laugh.
The Brendan Fraser one is without a doubt my lowest point. There's been a few small times where I feel like I barreled into a topic that really needed a bit more nuance to it. But Brendan Fraser definitely stands out as the one I'm just like, what were you doing? Why?
Idiot. Okay, this one comes from Amelia. Thank you, Amelia. Does one chilli eating moment stick out in your memory? And have you ever gone too far?
Yes. I think when you're yelling at 18-year-old Vera Lynn in South Carolina, you've gone too far. I mean, it's funny because that wasn't the first time that it happened. So there was... In the series, I went to go visit the brothers DeWitt, who are the guys that used to have the Guinness World Record in Australia, and they love, whenever a journalist comes to go visit them, they love giving you, not a chili, but one of the pastes. And I'm like, paste? It's fine, it'll be much simpler. It's like 17 times more concentrated than an actual chili. And he gave it to me, and I immediately, like, you know, when you put something in your mouth, you're just like, I've made a huge mistake. This is a terrible thing. I put it in my mouth and went, and you could just see this like this glint in their eye of like, this is what they live for. Yeah. And again, I had to pull over on another freeway, you know, somewhere outside of Gosford, and just be like, because the world starts spinning. You know, it's like you're a little bit drunk. It's like the world just starts spinning, and all you can do is just sit there and just let it happen.
Let it ride.
You can't. There's nothing you can do to hasten that. And I say in the podcast, you know, it stings on the way in, it stabs on the way through, and on the way out, it burns.
Now, this one comes from Shah. If you could interview one person, living or dead, who would it be?
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. Yeah. And I've thought about this quite a few times. Steve Jobs is somebody who I've read about, and I've interviewed so many people around Steve Jobs. So I interviewed Steve Wozniak, who was the other co-founder of Apple, and he just seems to me like one of those people where there are so many layers that went into him building the mythos of himself, the mythos of Apple, that I find really fascinating. I'd love to have the time to unpeel. There is obviously an amazing book that has been written about him, but Steve Jobs would be very up there. And the other one would be Robin Williams, who I really wish I'd had a chance to interview before he passed on, because I just sort of just know we would have. I feel like I'm reasonably confident we would have had a good conversation. Oh. And people that I know that have interviewed him have still sort of, he's etched in their memory. And I'm like,
missed it.
Yeah.
What an incredible human, hey?
Yeah.
That would have been really, really cool. Yeah. And touching.
I mean, he's one of those amazing people that that obviously I love. There's a thing I love about people who are really great entertainers, but you do know that there's something underneath the surface. And he has always had that. It's part of why I think he was a great actor as well, because he, had innate ability to kind of keep you laughing and keep all those juggling balls up in the air, but then you knew there was something underneath. And I find that very hard to look away from, and he just sort of had it.
He just has that humanity, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's like a humanness about him that anyone can seem to relate to.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, another one. This one comes from Emma. You do TV, web, podcasts, plus everything else. How do you describe what you do? Where do you want to end up, and what's the dream role for you?
I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I describe what I do as a broadcaster. Like that's the thing I write when I go into different countries because it's the simplest. But really what I actually do is I'm an interviewer. Like that's what I do. Like it's my job to get into conversations with people and get people talking. And what I want to do is find more ways of doing that, which sounds like a non-answer, but I think, in Australia, we have a slew of really interesting interview shows. Obviously, there's the Build series with Hayden Quinn.
Of course.
But there's also, Julia Zamiro's show, Arndo's show, Andrew Denton's show. And I guess what I'm interested in is finding new ways to have authentic conversations. And so the next thing I'm working on for the next little while is a few sort of formats, either in TV and in audio as well, where we can have interesting conversations that sort of build to a story. So that's the next little while is that's sort of what I'm working on.
And one thing that I took when I was doing my research was that it starts with the person first, the human first, and then the story comes out of that. It's not necessarily, I just want to sit down with Jennifer Garner because she's the most amazing movie star. She gets the most money. She's the biggest name. You want to find people that have a story, tell that story, and show that person.
I'm quite picky with who I sort of agree to interview now, in the sense that their level of fame, high, low, sort of doesn't matter to me quite as much as, can I tell a story? Can we tell a story with that person that starts somewhere, goes somewhere, ends somewhere, and then at the end is compelling enough that you want to share it? Because like I can talk about it in airy fairy terms as much as I want, but at the end of the day, my primary audience is social media, and I want it to be the sort of story that you start watching and then you're like, I can't stop. I have to finish it, and then I have to share it. Like that is the bar to clear in 2019 in terms of good interviews, and that's what I'm going for. And there have been plenty of people that I've been like, that person's great, I love their music, there is no story there. And in some ways you have to treat it, particularly with musicians, because I did a lot of musicians last year, you almost have to treat it like a magazine article. It's like if you couldn't hear the music, would the story still be worth telling? And I've actually said no to a bunch of musicians that I love because I'm like, you are great, I will see you play, I will not interview you.
Yeah, right.
And it's sort of a waste of their time too, because like, do you want to go to the effort of like doing an interview if it's not going to be shared? And I feel like that's a hard thing to ask somebody to do if you don't think it's going to be shared. Particularly some musicians are best at communicating through music, and that's what they should do.
They're artists, and that's their art.
Exactly.
Sometimes not talking.
There are some that maybe shouldn't.
Okay, one last question. Again from another Emma. Have you ever been in an interview situation where you've been scared?
Scared. There was a few times on It Burns, I must say, where like Ted Barris, who is the guy that was the professional cheerleader, we did that whole interview in the back of his car. So I rock up to his house in the morning and he's like, his wife comes out like, we're just going to drive to the top of a mountain. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting in the back of this car with my microphone and his wife's driving me to the top of a mountain. And we bring up I sort of challenge him on some things. And I just remember thinking like, if they kill me, they will not know where to find me because I'm up at the top of a mountain, which is the same mountain where they shot all the exterior scenes of the Twilight movies. So just imagine that, right? You're really in the middle.
Good place to hide a body,
right? That will then be reanimated and become a sexy vampire, which is what I imagine happened in that movie. I don't remember.
Just like you're thinking about Chili's, but you're also fantasizing about this death and resurrection into a vampire world.
Yeah, there you go. There's a sequel right there. But you do have these moments, and because audio, it's just you and a mic, you can go anywhere with it. You do find yourself in positions where it's great because you're not imposing on people and they'll share things with you that they wouldn't do if a camera was in their face. But at the same time, you are also becoming quite vulnerable in that environment where like, it's just me. And look, I don't think Ted would ever have done anything, but I do remember just being a little bit afraid when I'm on the top of this mountain. I'm like, Ted, I have to ask you some difficult questions, but please don't kill me while we're doing it. But I made it back, guys.
Yeah, but here he is. He's here. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have time for today. Marc Fennell, thank you so much. Big round of applause for Marc.
Thank you for having me.
Now, guys, make sure you download the podcast today. It's free on Audible. It burns and it is amazing. Make sure you check it out. Cheers.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for Hayden Quinn, ladies and gentlemen?
Oh, thank you. I hope I did okay.
You did great.